Hey there, everybody. We are back. This is Kenny and Kenny Squared. This is Sports on the Positive Tip podcast, where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. Hope you enjoyed our interview last week with Kevin Johnson. It was amazing. If you haven't listened, go back out and listen. Kenny, we've got mostly baseball to talk about today, right? I mean, I think we're going to title this episode "Cruel Summer."
Yeah, it's been a brutal week, man. Brutal week.
Yes, for the Yankees. And it wasn't a brutal week for the Mets, but boy, oh boy, it's an uphill climb. So are you buying or you selling? We're going to talk about that, right?
Oh yeah, you'll like my take here.
Okay. All right. I can't wait to hear it. This has got to be the most critical time of the baseball season, I would think, right? These next, 10 days or so really will determine a lot. Shohei Ohtani, man, are you buying that? You're a believer that he's going to get traded.
Yeah, I could go more detail, but I think it's important for them to trade him.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And you're just as a lot of people, maybe they know this or they don't about you, as big a Yankee fan you are, you're also as big a Giant fan. And I got to get your take on what's happening with Saquon Barkley. That has dominated the headlines here for the last few days.
Oh yeah, and yeah, it's just adding to the cruelty, man. Adding to the cruelty.
All right. You ready to get this going?
Let's do it.
All right.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. Welcome back. We did an interview last week, got that out last week, and it is great to be back to talk some sports. Hopefully you saw that or listened, and a lot of great nuggets taken away from Kevin Johnson. What a great leader he is. Kenny, I want to take you back. Do you know what happened on July 18th, 1995 at Yankee Stadium?
Oh, July 18th.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. You were only 5 years old, but you were there.
Oh, is that my first game?
I don't know if it was your first game. It probably was since you were only 5. But I'll give you another hint. Your two sisters were also with you.
Oh, was that the doubleheader where the guy flipped the bird?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And so you said the guy. Do you remember the pitcher?
I don't remember the pitcher's name, but I remember it being like a big story.
It was a big story, absolutely. So that was Jack McDowell, and that was 1995. And I was working for Bennigan's at the time, and Jerry, who was my boss, was just so nice and gave me, I think, either 4 or 5 tickets to go to this Twilight doubleheader. And they were great seats, if you remember right. I think we were sitting all the way down, and we stayed for both games. It was a Twilight doubleheader with the White Sox. And I took your two sisters, and Larice liked baseball, but Lorraine could care less about baseball. But I think she just enjoyed getting food and stuff like that. But yes, in the second game of that doubleheader, Jack McDowell, he gets booed off of the mound. And as he's going to the dugout, boy, oh boy, he makes a very obscene gesture to the crowd. His Yankee career was never the same after that. Now, I don't know if you know this or remembered this about Jack McDowell. He was an excellent pitcher for the White Sox. In fact, he won the Cy Young Award in 1993 with a 22-10 record, 3.37 ERA. And he pitched one more year for the White Sox, did well. The Yankees got him in a big trade. I don't quite remember. I should have looked it up who they traded for him. White Sox and Yankees seem to always make trades together, but at least back then. But anyway, he comes to the Yankees, and he actually had a pretty good year for the Yankees. He went 15-10 for the Yankees in 1995, and he had a 3.93 ERA. But Yankee fans, as it is with Met fans, can sometimes be very fickle, and they never quite accepted Jack McDowell, even though he pitched well for them. And his Yankee career was essentially over that night. Now, the Yankees got into the playoffs that year in 95. So since they were in contention, they didn't want to dump him right away. And he pitched well down the stretch. If I remember right, he started one of those playoff games against the Mariners, which is a bad memory, I know, when the Mariners came back and won that series. Yankees, though, as soon as the offseason hit, they traded him to the then Indians there in Cleveland. And he had a couple of good years for the Indians. He was part of that staff that went to the World Series and everything like that. But I bring that all up because it was an article this week that said that the Yankees didn't address the Jack McDowell thing as fast as they probably should have. And they should address Carlos Rodon, which I don't know. I'm going to ask your opinion. I'll give you mine real quick. I don't know that was as big a deal, not nearly, because he blew a kiss to the fans in Anaheim, and there were a lot of Yankee fans there, as there always is when the Yankees are on the road. And boy, oh boy, he got booed. So I want to let's start there because he hasn't pitched that well, and he got booed and he just blew a kiss. And we talked about before the season started, Rodon's pretty strong Christian guy. I would have fell out of my seat, and I wasn't watching the game at that point. But either way, if I had heard about this, like if he had did an obscene gesture, but he blew a kiss, which he shouldn't have either. He should just ignore the fans booing. But what is your take first on this? Is it much ado about nothing? And what's your take on how he's pitched so far?
I'll start with how he's pitched so far. He's pitched terrible. And terrible might be a little harsh, but they are paying this guy $161 million, and he's supposed to be the number 2 guy. And so far, he's pitched in 3 games against the Cubs, the Rockies, and the Angels. We're not talking the top teams in baseball here.
Right.
I have his game logs up. 5 1/3, 2 runs, 4 hits. That was his first start against the Cubs. That's decent. Against the Rockies, 5 innings, 4 runs, gave up a home run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. And then against the Angels, 4 1/3, 6 runs on 4 hits, gave up 2 home runs, 5 walks, and 3 strikeouts.
Wow.
So he hasn't pitched well, and part of it is probably because I know he had rehab starts and all, but he's still in very early season mode. He hasn't pitched all year, so it's kind of more or less his spring training. And I think that if the Yankees were winning and everything else was fine, this would kind of be a non-story. It's oh, well, Carlos Rodon, he's kind of doing his thing. But I think because every single little thing that's going wrong is amplified so much because this team is struggling, it just makes it a lot worse. Because, okay, yeah, you had a bad start. You booing or you kissing the fans that are booing you. That's kind of a fun way to react. But also, it's New York. People aren't going to take that. That'll fly in Chicago, that'll fly in San Francisco, but that's not going to fly here. And also, people are mad at him anyway for being hurt and not playing. You already have the Carl Pavano comparisons and everything. So I don't know. He did address it himself, saying he probably shouldn't have done that. It was just the right thing at that moment. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like a little bit Boone is kind of losing this locker room, but we can kind of get more into that in a sec.
Well, let's go there. Let's stay on the Yankees and Mets as we talk about this cruel summer so far. I won't spend as much time on the Mets because I think that they need to peel off probably around 8-10 wins in a row or continue to take series to get back into this. And we'll get back to them in a few seconds, but let's stay with the Yankees for a second because you said something really interesting there with maybe Aaron Boone's losing the locker room. Do you remember who the manager was of the Yankees in 1995?
Buck.
There you go. Yes. And they got his take on what happened that night. He said that, as he took McDowell, he was already in the dugout or his back was turned. He was getting ready to talk. He was on the field still. and he's getting ready to talk to whatever pitcher replaced McDowell, because obviously he got booed as they were taking him out. And so all Buck didn't see what had happened. He had just heard the commotion, and he asked Jim Lawrence, was probably playing third base that night, what happened. And Lawrence told him, it's really bad. He shouldn't have did this. And Buck addressed it right away with Jack McDowell. But the Yankees, I don't think, fined him or anything like that, for the gesture. Maybe they did, but the article was they didn't feel the Yankees addressed it the way they should have that night, because I don't know that McDowell ever apologized, that night. He was just kind of a player that had a lot of swagger, Do you think Buck has lost the locker room a little bit here? Because I did see some other players saying, hey, we just stink.
Yeah, and I mean, there was also Tommy Canley destroyed a fan, like a motorized fan, not a fan in the stands.
Right. Yeah, he lost it. Yeah, he like Paul O'Neill, vintage Paul O'Neill,
Yeah. Which, like, part of that, Tommy Canley's a little bit of a nut, so it kind of fits him a little bit. But it just kind of seems like his team is kind of giving up. I don't know. Like, I understand Judge is a huge part of this lineup, and you still have no idea when he's coming back. He was running the bases a couple days ago, but like, there's still really no like set timetable for him. Like, would I be surprised if he came back tomorrow? No. Would I be surprised if he came back September 12th? No. And I think the fuzziness in that is kind of still weird. Yankees are always kind of weird with injuries. Like, at first with Judge, it was like, oh, well, it's a slight sprained toe. Like, he should be fine. And then it's like, oh, he tore a ligament in his toe. Like, I don't know. Sometimes the Yankees are just weird like that.
Yeah.
But it's not Judge missing that's the problem. I have 4 guys here that have been the problem since Judge has gone down. I'm going to read you these numbers. I'll read the numbers first, and then I'll tell you the player. This guy is batting 161. This is all of these stats are since Judge last played on June 3rd. Batting 161, a 283 on base, a 202 slugging.
Ooh.
He has no home runs, 7 RBIs, 30 strikeouts in 145 plate appearances. So that guy is Anthony Rizzo.
Oh boy. Wow. That surprises me, because you know how much I like Anthony Rizzo, but wow.
Yeah. This guy, 162 batting average, 263 on base, 376 slugging. He has 7 home runs, 18 RBIs. So a little bit better, but also 35 strikeouts in 133 plate appearances. So like basically striking out at least once every 3 times, roughly-ish.
Wow.
That's Giancarlo Stanton, who's
boy.
played better recently.
Yeah.
I could probably cut that a little bit and show you a really bad stretch, but I won't do that. This guy is batting 209, 267 on base, 309 slugging. 1 home run, 6 RBIs, 21 strikeouts in 120 plate appearances. So like 1 out of every 5. DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah.
Which like 209 for a guy that like is a career like almost 300 hitter. It's not good.
Ex-batting champ. Yeah. Yeah.
And this last guy, he's actually pitcher here. Let's see. He started 8 games for the Yankees. The Yankees are 2-6 in those games. He personally is 1-4 with an 8.20 ERA.
Oof.
He's given up 11 home runs in 8 starts, 18 strikeouts or 30 strikeouts and 18 walks.
Wow.
And that's our boy Luis Severino.
Yeah.
Like,
so what's happening?
I don't know. Like, there's the problem right there. Like, okay, yeah, Judge isn't back, and he hit 62 home runs last year. But like all of these guys combined are hitting like well below league average.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's part of me thinks they've kind of just mailed in the season. And if that's the case, like that's 100% on Aaron Boone. But like it kind of seems like a lot of these guys have just gotten old overnight. Like DJ LeMahieu looks absolutely lost this year. I don't have his full season stats, but I can pull him up. But like he just kind of seems like he's batting 231 this year. His OPS plus is 82.
Yeah.
So like he's 18% below league average.
Wow. Wow.
It just kind of seems like I don't know what's going on with LeMahieu. I don't know because like last year, okay, he was hurt. Stanton, he might be finally fully healthy because usually when he's fully healthy is when he plays in the field. So maybe that's part of his stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with Rizzo. I had heard a thing that his like stats went absolutely down after that collision with Tatis.
Yeah.
So maybe he's still kind of suffering some lingering effects from that. But either way, like they fired the hitting coach before the All-Star break, and since then they're 1-5. I don't think it's a hitting coach unless
Yeah.
Sean Casey just needs a few weeks to kind of feel these guys out. But like it's hard because also I don't know where the fix is. But it sounds like also the team is kind of shifting away from like being buyers at the deadline. There's been a couple articles that have come out that said that they are looking to both buy and sell, which is like the Yankee way of saying like, yeah, we're not going to fully sell, but we'll try to sell pieces. Apparently the priority is trying to get under like the next bracket in the luxury tax, which they are now like about $1.5 million above it.
Yeah.
Which like you trade a Gleyber Torres, you're probably going to get under that, or Wandy Peralta, any of these guys that are impending free agents. I don't know if any value will come from Severino, but he would probably also be a guy that you can kind of do a salary dump. Josh Donaldson is probably going to get like the Ellsbury treatment, and he'll be on the injured list and then just like kind of get goodbye at the end of the year. They say he's probably out for the year anyway. So
yeah, when he played, he didn't play well at all. This is puzzling to me. What's happening with the Yankees, and I guess it's also magnified because you're in this really great division too. You know, with and by the way, the Orioles are now in first place, one game up on the Rays. It's a
good
long
for them.
season. Yeah, you and I said that, right? When the Rays got off to that hot start, that hey, it's a long season, but that could have very easily been the Yankees catching them. I don't even want to go back to how you and I said in our preview in March that we were surprised that the Yankees didn't in the offseason acquire another bat or two, especially in the outfield. That really surprised me, and so here we are, right? With we're in late July and we've got the big injury which we feared, and but here's the thing though, Judge has had a history of these injuries, so has Stanton. Rizzo, I have no idea. LeMahieu, I have no idea. Maybe Rizzo's hurt, but I don't. I guess here's the thing. I don't know that there's a quick fix for this team though, because some of the names, if you look at, and we'll get to buy or sell in just a little bit, but like if you look at the Cubs, I texted you about 2 weeks ago. The ideal guy would be, Cody Bellinger, right? Big left-handed slugger, seems to have righted the ship, having a really good year. But I don't even know if that would be enough, right? Some of these guys just need to, I hate to use that expression, play to the back of their baseball card. But LeMahieu's a big key here, man. He's been such a great pure hitter through his whole career. But we kind of saw it coming in the last 2 years with him that, he's just been okay in the last few years, and now this is a horrible stretch for him, So what's the fix here? Is there a fix? What do you see here down the road? Because their starting pitching has to get better, first of all. And you can't get swept by the Angels, and I'm no knock on the Angels, but they had spurts this year, but they're overall a mediocre team at best.
Well, and the Angels, like I think they had lost like 9 of 11 or something like that. Like they were in their own awful swoon. I don't know what the direct fix is, because right now, like the only thing that to me has been kind of the saving grace for this Yankee team has been Garrett Cole, who has been tremendous. But like, yeah, like the starting pitching I think needs to be better because the bullpen is good, but the bullpen is already starting to show signs of fatigue.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because of like you're only getting 4 innings from Severino. You're only getting 5 innings from Carlos Rodon. Like that's taxing on your bullpen.
Yeah.
Herman can give you a perfect game and then go and give you 3 innings. Like,
yeah,
that's hard. It will be interesting to kind of see how this team continues to progress as far as their rotation goes. Because like Nestor Cortez is starting to throw, and I wonder where he's going to fit in.
That's
been
a big injury too. Yeah, I gotta say that's a big loss, especially what he meant to them last year.
Yeah, I will say another bright spot has been Clark Schmidt. I'll see if I can pull up his stats because he is also like he got off to a dreadful start at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
but really since and to be fair with him, he had always been like a guy that's an opener, a guy that's in the bullpen, a guy that's kind of been back and forth. But this year, they put him in the rotation and they've kept him there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see here. I'll go from here.
He's got a big arm. I like him.
So he started 10 games. So this is since May 19th. He is 4-2, which the Yankees never score runs for him. I mean, that's kind of the case everywhere. But he's 4-2 with a 2.83 ERA.
Yeah.
47 strikeouts, 13 walks, 6 home runs. So like he's got pretty decent stats. He'd be the only other one. Like either him and Cole are the only guys that I'd be like, okay, yeah, and obviously Judge that. Yeah, they've definitely like played very well. I don't know. Part of it is they got to change their hitting philosophy. It's hard because like I don't know. And someone had said this, I forgot where I heard it, but it seems like everyone that goes to the Yankees has been just like they've changed who they are. And like the person was giving the example of Josh Donaldson.
Yeah.
And, like you remember Josh Donaldson is like kind of like that guy with an edge, like the kind of the crazy dude. And like I really haven't seen it aside from like the weird incident with Tim Anderson.
Right.
Like like that's really been it.
Right.
So I don't know. Part of it is like this roster is not constructed well at all.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know who the left fielder is going to be the rest of the year. Are you going with Oswaldo Cabrera? Are you going with IKF? Are you going with Jake Bowers when he gets healthy? Billy McKinney? Like all of those guys are okay, but they're not like major league level players.
Yeah.
And like you said, like they've been saying for 2 years, oh, we need a left fielder. Oh, we need a left fielder. And they just really haven't addressed it.
I don't get it.
And
I've been surprised at that. I really have.
Yeah, and I go back to also when they signed Carlos Rodon. Brian Cashman said it. I believe also Aaron Judge said it. We're not done signing people. The only other person they signed in the offseason was like a day before the regular season started, and they signed Franchi Cordero. Like they really didn't address a lot of their bigger needs.
Yeah.
Because like I get the shortstop thing. You want Anthony Volpe in there. You want to give him run. Fine. I totally get that. But like their outfield has been infielders that have just kind of been thrown out in the outfield. Like IKF has been pretty decent out there, but he's not an outfielder.
Yeah.
Same with Cabrera. Like Oswaldo Cabrera came up as an infielder and like was thrown in the outfield towards the end of last year because of injuries. Stanton can't play the outfield every day because like if he plays more than 3 days in a row, he seems to get hurt.
Yeah.
Bader also, he left the game with another injury. Like
he's another one that gets
I don't know.
A lot. Yeah.
Like, and you look at it, there's not a ton of guys to sell. Like, like the Cardinals, they're like, okay, yeah, the season's over. We're looking to 2024, and they have a few pieces that people want. But like a lot of the pieces that the Yankees have aren't like great selling pieces. Probably the only one I would say is Gleyber Torres, and maybe a couple of relievers like a Clay Holmes or a Michael King or guys like that. But like Anthony Rizzo has an option for this year, but like he's probably not gonna opt out.
Yeah.
DJ LeMahieu's here for the next several years. Giancarlo Stanton's here the next several years. Like you're kind of stuck with these guys.
Yeah.
Severino is a free agent, but also like no one's taking him.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, this is going to be my last question on the Yankees. I was going to ask you who's most likely to be dealt at the trading deadline from the Yankees. Is it Gleyber?
Yeah, I would probably say Gleyber.
Yeah.
Because also, well, maybe Gleyber. Because if they want to trade Gleyber and put Peraza at second base, have him kind of as the second baseman every day, that's a possibility. But with Josh Donaldson getting hurt, I can see them just putting Peraza at third every day.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would say he's probably one of the likely guys.
Yeah.
Because he does have the most value and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thing is that he's most likely he's a rental though for most teams, right? I would think so. You know, you always struggle with that. You know, how much do you give for a rental? You know.
Yeah. Well, and here's a list of guys that are free agents at the end of the year. Josh Donaldson, he's hurt. He's not going anywhere. Severino, Frankie Montas, he's had a great Yankee career. IKF might have some value, especially since he can play everywhere and has speed.
Yeah.
Bader, Wandy Peralta.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think any of those other guys are going anywhere at the deadline. It's Torres that teams will want, I think, you know, but I don't know that you'll get a ton back for him since he's a rental and he's not one of those top tier players, you know, like when the Dodgers got Max Scherzer a few years ago, you know, they gave up a lot to get him. But they also knew that for 2 months, and he pitched extremely well for the Dodgers, you know, for those couple of months. With the deadline now being, you know, the end of July, beginning of August, it's only 2 months that you have, you know, a player that, you know, you can't control. All right, last question. Are the Yankees in on Shohei, or we'll get to the Padres in a second, but do you think the Yankees have what it takes to even make a run at Shohei?
I think that a little bit of it's kind of more of the Yankees, of course, are going to check in. I think they do have the capital.
Yeah.
Because the Angels have said 2 top 100 prospects. The Yankees have that in Jason Dominguez and Austin Wells.
Right.
And I believe Everson Pereira is also a top 100. So they have it. But here's my thing. I think would Shohei Ohtani help this team? Absolutely. Will it make them the instant favorites in the East? No. Not with the way this team is constructed.
Right.
And you'd be giving up a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff for him.
Yeah.
Like if this team was like second place, 9-10 games over 500 and like knocking on the door of Tampa Bay or Baltimore, I'd say, yeah, go for it. And I think they would have it. But I don't know. I don't think that the Yankees are going to trade any of their big prospects anyway. I think they're going to try to hold on to some of those guys.
I think they should, because, you know, some of these guys that you've named, I think LeMahieu, Rizzo, they may just be getting old. And, you know, we hate to see that with any ball player, but that might be the case with a few of these players, you know. It seems like Stanton's been old for a while now, you know, because he gets hurt so much. I don't know what it's going to take for the Yankees to turn this around. And I think if they were like in the Central Division, I'd be like, okay, they're right in the mix. I mean, the Rays
they'd be in first place.
Yeah, I mean, the Rays are going to get their second wind, I think, and them and the Orioles are going to go at it. I think the Blue Jays will get hot. The Blue Jays have just been good all year long. I hope the Red Sox don't get hot, especially this weekend since they're playing the Mets. But it's such a good division. It's so hard to compete when you have these players that you're depending on playing way, way, way below expectations. Let's get to the Mets real quick, Ken. I think that and listen, we see glimmers because Scherzer has pitched extremely well. Verlander was vintage Verlander the other day. 1 hit through 7 innings, and he gave up a home run to Luis Roberts. We can get to the White Sox in a bit too, because they are, to me, one of the biggest head scratchers around. When I look at, now seeing that team for 3 games, I'm like, this team should be like one of the best teams in the American League. But anyway, I think Starling Marte, he just hasn't looked himself all year long, and now he's on the IL with migraines, and I think he hasn't looked his same since he broke his finger last year, and now he's been, suffering these migraines and everything like that. So we'll put him to the side. Jeff McNeil showing signs this week. I mean, no one could ever imagine that Jeff McNeil would be hitting 248 at this stage in the season. Not the guy who's hit 300, I think 3 times and was the batting champion last year. We talked a little bit about him last week, but Pete Alonso, I think, is where the spotlight is going to now get if he doesn't break out of this. I think he did get a really good base hit yesterday, but outside of that, he's gone homerless for a bit now, and he's batting now 201, and so you just can't. He's your guy that can carry a team for a bit. Now Lindor, he seems to come up in the clutch, but then that's it, because he got a big double yesterday. But he also, he's batting 230. So, he does have 19 homers, over 60 RBIs. So he's in like the top 5, top 10 in both those categories. And he's played a flawless shortstop. He's really, really been great. But it's hard when you don't come through. I'm not going to blame Daniel Vogelback and some of the other guys that are second tier player. Mark Canha, Canha's come up in the clutch a few times, but if they're starting pitching, and it was good to see Quintana come back yesterday finally, and he pitched well. And so I think that if those 3 guys at the top of the rotation, they got a shot. There's 7 games out of the wild card right now. So teams tend to come back to earth, right? Some of these teams have been playing over their heads. Even the Braves lost 4 in a row until they won yesterday. Although them losing 4 in a row, they still have a 10-game lead, But some of the other teams that's been hot for a while, like, the Arizonas of the world and stuff like that, if the Mets do get hot, they could get in the mix. I don't see, unless the Mets really go into the tank this next week or so, I don't see them selling. I don't know who they would get, but I don't see them peeling off Verlander and Scherzer. I don't see them peeling off David Robertson, because then who's going to close, and that stadium, like I said, a little bit like the Angels, I think they are a good comparison to the Mets. Citi Field will be empty in September. It'll be, it'll start in August, and then in September, there will be no fans, showing up to the ballpark. I think if Verlander and Scherzer are such a key, like you said with the Yankees, how the bullpen has been so taxed. That's been a reason why the Mets bullpen hasn't been good. That plus the fact we never really replaced, and don't get me wrong, Robertson has been excellent, 2.13 ERA if I remember right, 13 saves. He's been excellent, but they never really tried to replace Diaz, and that's hurt them. But they, their bullpen has also been overtaxed, because when these guys can't go more than 4 or 5 innings, as you said, that puts a taxing on the bullpen. I don't think the Mets will sell. I think they'll get into the mix here. They got to take 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox, this weekend to stay. They should have swept the White Sox, as bad as the White Sox have been playing. But they did take 2 out of 3. We'll take it. If they just can win series now, and aside from going on a long streak, but the Red Sox are in the mix, so they're going to be playing, at the top of their game as well. It should be a good series this weekend. All right, let's do a little game of buying or selling. We'll stay with baseball for just a few more minutes here, and we'll come back. We'll end with Shohei, because I think that's going to be the story. The Cubs, buying or selling?
Oh, that's a good question. I think their Cubs might have a soft sell.
Soft sell. All right. Well, so let me ask you about the two players that are likely if they sell, right? And that would be Bellinger and Stroman. Thoughts on both those guys?
I think Bellinger will help a team somewhere. I would love for that team to be the Yankees, like we talked about before.
You know, he's a free
But
agent at the end of the year as well. So yeah.
yeah, and I think that's why they'll look at trading him because they can probably get something for him. Stroman is interesting because Stroman has said a few times, "I want to stay here,"
Yeah.
but also Stroman is a little too outspoken about like different teams anyway. Because like I remember when he was a free agent, people were like, "Oh, well, what about the Yankees?" And he like badmouthed the Yankees for not seeing him as valuable as he thought he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
He'll never come back to the Mets either. Yeah.
no, he's not coming back to the Mets either.
He's a New York
So
guy, the Long Island guy, you know?
yeah, he I think he went to Pat Met if I remember right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think Stroman will probably get traded because also like um with Stroman, he can help a team because all these contending teams always need like an extra starting pitcher.
Yeah. And he's
Like
solid, man. He really is, right? He's a solid pitcher.
yeah, like imagine Arizona with that 1-2 punch there. That would be tough. The
Yeah.
Dodgers could always use an extra starter.
Oh, yeah, because they have all those injuries. Yeah. 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 All
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
Texas never replaced Jacob DeGrom.
Not really.
Um,
Yeah.
that could I would hate for him to go to Houston. That would annoy me.
I think he said that's where if he does get traded, I think he said he wants to go there. Um, how about I'm not sure of anybody else on the Cubs. I'm sure there's a couple more guys like Horner and a few others that might be up for grabs there, but I think those are the two main names. I don't think the Cubs will contend the rest of this year. I think they made a few steps forward. So I like what you said. I think they'll also have a soft sell because I think they want to build on, they certainly have improved so far this year. They don't want to fall apart these last 2 months. The so uncardinal like way. We've talked about the Cardinals a lot this year. And they show no signs of really coming out of it. But so uncardinal like for their GM to say, yeah, we're open for business. We're trading some players. I don't think they'll trade Goldschmidt and Arenado. What do you think?
I agree. I wish this is another one of those things where it was like, man, if the Yankees were that much closer, you package say like a Johnny Burrito, a Oswald Peraza, and a couple other low-level prospects for Nolan Arenado. You have your third base. Oh, Josh Donaldson too, just to kind of dump some salary there.
Yeah.
Like that would be such a great move that can really take the Yankees to the next level. And you have a third baseman for the next several years, which their third base has kind of been weird the last few years.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going though. It just doesn't make any sense because like if you're looking at 2024, those guys are still going to be like the pillars of your organization.
They're still in their prime. Goldschmidt's a little bit older, but he's still, I mean, it's not like these guys have had off years, those two. I mean, Goldschmidt's not having the MVP year like he did last year, but I mean, he's a great first baseman, fielding first baseman as well. And so is Arenado. I mean, there's no way I'm trading either one of those guys if I'm the Cardinals. Now, the guy that they're saying is Flaherty, the pitcher who's been up and down. When he's been good, he's been unbelievable. And I thought he was still young, and he is, but he's coming up on free agency. I didn't realize that he had already been around for 6 years. So they're saying he's the most likely now to go. What are your thoughts on him?
That's one of the ones that makes sense. Him and Montgomery, I would say both are probably on the move. Same with the Cubs and Stroman. Like a lot of these contenders, they could use starting pitching.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you can never have enough of.
Yeah.
And like you look at it and you're like, well, it kind of makes sense. And I do have Goldschmidt's stats.
Yeah.
He's batting 286, 373 on base, 343 slugging. So it's a little lower than.
Yeah.
But he's still got 846 OPS and a 131 OPS plus, which is still very, very good.
Yeah.
But only 16 home runs, 49 RBIs.
Right. Right.
And only in 94 games. So
yeah. I'm not getting rid of him. I'm sorry, I'm not trading him. You'd have to back the truck up for me to trade him. Or again, like I said, I know he's been around for a while now, but he's been one of the best players in baseball for a long time now.
Oh yeah,
trading him.
Like who's a better first baseman?
Yeah.
Like overall, probably just Freddie Freeman.
Yeah.
You might make a case with Alonso depending on
not this year.
What's valuable.
Yeah, not this year. I mean, Freeman is unbelievable, by the way. He doesn't get enough play since he's been in LA, but he's still batting way over 300. But yeah, Flaherty is the guy if I'm the Cardinals, him and maybe a couple of the other guys that they have there, but I'm the two pillars I'm not dealing if I'm them.
Yeah, Tyler O'Neill, I've heard, has gotten a little bit of buzz too.
He's a good player. Yeah, he's a very good player. I wouldn't trade him either because isn't he still kind of young? I mean, I don't know, man. The Cardinals, I'm not breaking that up. There's something that happened this year and that they haven't recovered from. And, there's not the Cardinal way, but they've been off that with this new GM that they have. It's not the Cardinal way to fire their manager so fast. But I'm not. It's going to be hard for me to see him surviving past, this year. I don't think they'll fire him during the season. I mean, he seems like a good manager. At least he seemed like a good manager last year. But they never recovered from losing in the playoffs last year. It seemed like them and the Mets actually. But at least the Mets got off to a good start. The Cardinals didn't. They've been pretty bad all year. All right, the Padres. Now they made a couple of moves in the last few days. Odor. I think they designated for assignment. Their catcher, they sent back Nola, who was good for a couple of years. They sent back down to the minors. There's teams that will want Odor because he's a veteran, clutch player. What do the Padres do?
I think the Padres should sell. I would look at trading Soto.
Yeah.
Mainly because and I'll pull up Juan Soto's stats here.
Been good.
And mainly because this is the time to sell him because he's not a full-blown rental. He still has another year.
Yeah.
But let's see. He is because last year he seemed like he was still adjusting. 262 batting average, which is it's a little lower than his career average. But a 420 on base, which is very Juan Soto and a 485 slugging. He's got 17 home runs, 54 RBIs, and he's played in all 97 games for the Padres.
Yeah. I mean, so projected, he'll probably hit 30 homers, 100 RBIs, and the guy gets on base like crazy. I'm the Padres. I try to lock him up long term. That's a lot of money, though, because – they've got their other three guys on these big, big contracts. And now, do you consider, if you're the Padres, because I think he is going to be a free agent, right? Do you consider shipping off Blake Snell?
That's a toughie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because also, Blake Snell did win a Cy Young, right?
Yeah.
And also, once again, a left-handed pitcher.
A great pitcher.
Can always use it.
He's a great pitcher. He's talking about the Yankees that left-hander in Yankee Stadium. That's always been kind of where you want to be. You add him to that rotation, you're fixing a lot of your problems. You imagine a blockbuster if the Yankees could get Soto and Blake Snell. I don't know who they would trade for them.
Their entire farm system.
The entire farm system. That's right. I don't think the Padres are going to sell. I agree with you. I would, but I just again they were in the same position as the Mets. Kind of they've invested a lot of money here, man. And listen, it's not like San Diego for years, Kenny, has been a hotbed for baseball. That there were times. I mean, you've seen it at times where that stadium has been empty. and the
Yeah.
fans so lukewarm and a little bit like the LA fans, coming late and leaving early, to games. I can remember not even that long ago, the Mets playing them on the coast, and you would see the game start, stadium's half emptied, and it fills up a little bit, and then if the Padres are losing, by the time you get to the 7th or 8th inning, they're out of there. So it hasn't been that long, and they're starving for a championship. They've never won one. They've been to a World Series a couple of times, but I don't think they'll sell. So now I'll leave my opinion out of this one, and we'll go to the American League right after. Your opinion on whether the Mets should sell?
I don't think the Mets should sell because kind of you had just said about the fans. If the Mets trade Verlander, Scherzer, and I don't know, someone crazy, I wouldn't say that'd be stunned if they traded like a Pete Alonso
No.
they wouldn't trade Lindor.
Yeah. No.
But like I think waving the white flag would be a big mistake because also like you could call this year a little bit of an anomaly, but like if you trade any of your big arms, who are you replacing them with? Do you sign Blake Snell in the offseason? Like
Yeah.
it
No.
I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah.
All
right.
I wouldn't sell.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Now you may see a guy like Mark Hanna get Del Vogel back. I'm not sure a lot of teams will line up for Vogel back, but I think a lot of teams will line up for Mark Hanna because he's a veteran and he's come through in the clutch at times this year. I think they'll make a few small moves like that. And if they can get, one more bat in there, I think they will. But for the most part, I think the Mets are going to stand pat. All right. I want to get to this American League team last, so I'll start with two teams real quick. The Mariners, who are sitting at 500 right now, and the Guardians, who are 2 games under. What do those two teams do?
Mariners, they might kind of sit pat a little bit. I think the Mariners and the Guardians are kind of in similar spots where they might have slightly overachieved last year.
Yeah.
And like became really good, but a lot of their guys kind of regressed. Did you see that whole thing with Kelnick?
I did. Yes. I feel terrible. I mean, you talk about the Paul O'Neill thing, so he's got broken foot now, right? Is it a foot that he broke? Did he break his foot? Yeah.
Yeah, and he's gonna be out for the year now.
He was just playing well. He really has kind of been. We thought he was going to be great. He's been a little bit of a bust up until this year.
Yeah.
No, that was terrible. That was terrible. I hate when a player gets hurt not on the field. You know what I mean? So that wasn't good.
I do think though Mariners they'll probably stay pat. Like I don't think they might try to add a piece here and there, but also like you're looking up at the Angels kind of they're half a game back. You're still looking up at Houston, who seems to always still be good, even though they trade away or let people walk all the time. And Texas has been really good this year.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of stay pat. You kind of say, well, we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can try to get a guy more for next year. Like I don't know if they would go full Juan Soto, but like a guy like that has a year and change of control. That way you have a guy for next year. I think a full-blown rental like a Cody Bellinger wouldn't necessarily work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The Mariners might try to swing hard here. The Guardians have already said that they're not trading Shane Bieber.
Okay.
Which kind of tells me that they're not going to make a big move.
Okay. Okay.
So, and they are, even though they're 2 below 500, they're also only 2 games out of the division.
I know. Yeah, I know.
So,
the Twins aren't that much better than the Guardians, I don't think. I think both those teams are kind of equal. All right, I really want to get your take on the White Sox. I just they've got 3 really excellent pitchers, and one got lit. I mean, the Mets lit him up the other night, Giolito, which I was surprised. But they've got Dylan Cease. I mean, and then they've got I can't believe the year Tim Anderson is having. I don't remember a player of his caliber falling off so fast. I don't know if he's been hurt. I don't think he has. But he has had an unbelievably bad year, and he's been the cornerstone of that team. But they've got some good players. Luis Robert is really good. They've got all those outfield Eloy. I mean, they've got. It's hard for me to believe, and I know Abreu is not on the team anymore, and he was kind of the heart and soul of that team. But they weren't good last year either. If you're the White Sox, what are you doing, man?
I just looked at Tim Anderson's stats and I'm a little stunned. I didn't realize he was that bad.
Was he have 15 RBIs or something like that?
And no home runs. He's batting .235.
I mean, he looked like he was coming out of it, of course, against the Mets. He had one game where he had 3 hits, and he looked vintage Tim Anderson hits. But this is the same guy that dramatically ended the the Field of Dreams game 2 years ago. And a perennial all-star. He's in so many baseball ads and everything like that too. A little bit of the face of the game, let the boys play, because young players celebrating all the time. I've been shocked at his, at his drop off. But what do you do if you're the White Sox? They're nowhere.
Well, I'll start with this. It seems like the White Sox peaked at the Field of Dreams game.
Yeah.
Because really since then, what have they done?
Nothing.
I think the White Sox end up selling.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got Giolito once again, pitching. I mean, he's got that elite stuff. Dylan Cease, who finished 2nd or 3rd in the Cy Young last year.
Yeah.
He's got elite stuff. I think at this point it's just rip it down. Tim Anderson's a free agent at the end of the year, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so he would be a rental. I think a team might think that a change of scenery will do well for him. And I think we'll take a chance on him for these last couple of months.
Oh man, I think I've just found the best team for him.
Who's
How
that?
about the Dodgers?
Tim Anderson. Because they've struggled in that middle infield this year, right? With the injuries and everything.
Yeah.
Listen, I think he would be. You put him on the Dodgers, I think you'll see Tim Anderson of 2 years ago. Because think about how badly he probably wants to have a good last couple of months as a free agent here. You know what I mean? His drop off has been stunning, and it can't be that he's old, right? I agree with you. I think the White Sox, I'm backing up the truck and I'm starting over next year, and I'm trading one of those pitchers because I'm going to get a lot, for them. I don't know that I'll get a ton for Anderson for probably a rental, but I'll probably get a good prospect, or maybe even 2, for him. I'll probably get somebody's bad contract as well. But I'm backing up the truck if I'm the White Sox. There's something seriously wrong there. Just like, the Cardinals, there's something underlying that we as fans don't see. There's something underlying with the White Sox that we don't see, and I couldn't wait to watch this. I was able to watch most of it this week. And I'm like, what is wrong with this team? I can't place my finger on it. And they didn't quit. They came back. The Mets were winning 11-4, and they almost lost that game. They wound up winning 11-10. That was the night where, did you see that night? That was Tuesday night, where there was 5, 6, 7 games where the scoring was unbelievable. I think one team won 10.
Yeah.
The D-backs won 16-13. The Mets were 11-10. I think the Cubs scored 17 runs. It was just all of a sudden an offensive explosion. One night this week. All right, let me get you a final. We'll close out baseball because I want to get to Saquon Barkley. Real quick, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, we'll probably have more time to talk about him next week. It'll probably be front and center as we get closer to the deadline. You're a believer that he's going to get traded. Where's he going to?
Oh, I don't know. I think that they should trade him, because if they don't think that they can sign him long term, you can't let him walk out the door for nothing. And I know it doesn't happen that often, but if you say, hey, Shohei, we could sign you in the off season still, and trade you and get a whole bunch back so you can have a squad with you, not just Mike Trout who gets hurt.
It's
Like I
happened
said,
a few times. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
happened a few times, but it
Yeah.
doesn't really happen that often.
No.
But you could make that case.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Because there's a few like people are saying, oh, maybe the Rays might look into him, which that would be scary and also very interesting because like Tampa Bay probably wouldn't sign him long term,
Yeah.
but that would
Oh,
definitely
no.
make them the World Series favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
No,
going
he's not
into
staying.
this year.
Yeah. That would be a 2-1 thing. Yeah.
I don't know, because like the Dodgers has kind of seemed like the perfect fit, but it also seems like the Dodgers aren't really that interested. A team I think that I would love to see him on though, and I don't know if this would happen, the Arizona Diamondbacks,
Yeah. Yeah.
because adding that type of arm and that type of bat into the lineup would make them the favorites in the West and could vault them from being like a team that finished very low last year to potentially the World Series.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to see Shohei Ohtani also play in a playoff game.
Yeah.
It was fun watching him in the World Baseball Classic. So
Yeah.
I do think he's going to get traded. At this point, I have no idea where.
Yeah. There's a few teams that can give a lot of I think the Rays are probably one of those teams. I hadn't thought about them that could give a lot of prospects to rent him. I think if the Dodgers get him, they're going to look to keep him. I would say there's two teams for me real quick that if I'm them, I do whatever I can to sign him in the offseason because I do think he has a taste for history and the Japanese heritage. And so I do think that either the Mariners, I don't know if the Mariners can afford him, or the Yankees. I think, the great history there with Matsui, and Matsui, it worked out great here. And you saw the following that he had when he played here. And he was a hero here, helped them win the World Series. But in Seattle, again, there's obviously a huge Asian population, and they will come out. They'll support that team. I think he'd do great there. And obviously at the All-Star game, they gave him that big, round of applause and everything like that. So as far as at the deadline, see, I'm still of the believer that he's not going anywhere at the deadline. And I don't know, that owner's in a tough spot. I think he's going to have a sit down face-to-face. Your scenario is very interesting. I think Chapman, right? The Yankees and Chapman was kind of the last that we saw that happen. We saw that happen years ago with Ricky Henderson in Toronto and Oakland, I remember. But that would be interesting to see, for sure, if they trade him. But he's gonna have to sit down with him and his agent and say, listen, is there a shot? Do we have a shot at keeping you if we offered you X amount? We know you want to get to free agency, but do you like it here? Do you want to stay here? And if he indicates yes, it's going to be hard for him to pull the trigger. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
But you lose him to free agency for nothing to arguably the best player, the best ever two-way player, or at least since Babe Ruth. You got to live with that for a long time. People are going to remind you of that for a long time. All right. Go ahead. You had one more thing?
Well, and I'd heard it, I'm going to probably butcher it a little bit, but I heard it on another podcast when they were talking about Ohtani, saying like a lot of times people more remember like, oh, well, you traded this guy for, like, this guy got traded away. Like,
right.
Like people talked about how Ken Griffey Jr. got traded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's more remembered than maybe even some of his time with Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it'd be hard, but also like, so let's just say he gets traded to the Yankees and the Yankees give back Peraza, Pereira, and Jason Dominguez. Like arguably their top three prospects. Throw in Austin Wells there. And 3 out of those 4 guys hit. Like it'll be like, oh wow, well it was worth it. But also, like, any team that's going to trade for him, maybe with the exception for the Rays, like, you would have to make sure that you sign him because you're not going to give up your farm for 2 months, even if you win the World Series and then lose it. But also, are you willing to sign him for 10 years, $650 million? Because that's probably, that right now is kind of roughly the going price for him.
Just unfathomable, man, to think about those numbers. But you're getting really 2 players though. So
Yeah.
that's how you could justify that. But it's gonna be hard to sign other players once you sign him, unless you're the Yankees or the Dodgers or maybe even the Mets. Wow. Yeah, it's an excellent point. All right. Saquon Barkley. Well, first, and we could get maybe to the Browns player next week because and we got to probably wait to see how that turns out. Perion Winfrey. It's just I sent you that because it's just a bizarre story, and we'll see how that plays out there in Cleveland. Of him, and apparently he knew these ladies. He pulls a gun on them and assaults them, takes their phones. It's just a bizarre story. And the Browns cut ties. To their credit, they cut ties with him immediately. Now he's not their best player, but he's been a good player for them. But maybe we'll come back to that next week because I really want to get your take on Saquon Barkley and what's the end game here now. So he has to play this year, right? Unless he just decides to sit out, just not show up. And it was the Jet player did that, right? A Steelers player did that.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell. He was never
work out that well for him. Yeah.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know what the Giants are doing. Saquon Barkley to me is more important to their offense than Daniel Jones is.
Right.
And at this point, like, you just got to sign the dude. Like, and you can't lowball him. Like, apparently one of the offers was lower than the franchise tag was. I don't know. It's hard because, like I said, like, the Giants, if they don't have Saquon Barkley week 1 out there, like, they already have to deal with the Eagles and the Cowboys and Commanders with a new ownership, and they also said maybe they're gonna change their name again.
Yeah.
So, like, their division's already tough. Their schedule is already tough as it is. You need Saquon Barkley. You need to figure out a way to sign him.
Yeah.
But also this gives me like it's also the Yankees at this point, like, World Series, I'm at about maybe a 5% chance. Judge gets back, things start to really start cooking. You might get a crazy run. They're only like 4 games out of the wild card. Like, once you get into the playoffs, you never know. Look at the Phillies last year. Look at the Padres last year.
Right.
But the Giants, I'm like, okay, so I guess we're just trying to lose this year.
Yeah.
And then, like, I'm looking at the Knicks too, and I'm like, the Knicks did the smart thing by not signing or trading a really old expensive player. But they still aren't any better than they were last year.
Yeah.
I don't think they're better than the Bucks. So now I'm like, okay, so, like, what am I looking forward to in sports over the next, like, 10 months or so?
Yeah. I know it's a business and I know it comes down to the money, but I'll just say this. Saquon Barkley has represented the Giants extremely well in a couple of ways. He's just this really, really good guy, appears to be this really good guy, but also the way he's come back from this devastating major injury. It took him a minute, right, to come back. But last year you could tell he was all the way back. You're right. If the Giants don't build on the momentum they built last year, then what's it for? If they're a playoff team now takes a couple of steps backwards, they're just like a lot of other NFL teams. Without him, they're taking those couple of steps backwards. But also, you're alienating, and eventually you're going to lose somebody who represents the Giant way in an extremely positive manner, which is one of the factors I think they took into consideration with Daniel Jones. You could say the same about him, upstart guy, played hard all the time, represents the blue extremely well. I think Barkley's that guy. And I don't understand how the Giants can't figure a way to get that money under the cap, and I know it's tricky with football, right? but we might be missing something. I don't know what we're missing with him. Do they think his injury history is going to come back? I mean, he's a specimen in terms of the way he trains and everything. I'm with you, man. I don't. And do you want an unhappy? Do you want to? It takes it. Maybe I'm off here. You tell me if I am. But he seems like the type of guy. It takes a lot to alienate or get him angry. But he's angry right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to talk about this again next week because I think there'll be some things that'll unfold this week. He doesn't show up for camp, or he can sit out the season. That's his right. That's not his right, but he can do that. But that hasn't worked out well for some players, namely Le'Veon Bell, a few years ago. And I'm wondering if they were around the same age. Bell was never the same, after that, after he sat out like that, missing that season in his prime. He was never, ever the same. All right. Ready for some inspiration? Okay. Yeah.
I'm looking up. Start with some inspiration. I'll hit you.
All right. I'll do mine quick. I don't know what made me think about this player this past week, but my inspiration is one Rusty Staub. That name probably sounds familiar to you. I'm going to tell you a quick funny story. Rusty Staub was an excellent player with the Astros, and he played a long time because I think he came up when he was 19 years old with the Houston Astros. I think they were a Colt 45. When they were expansion team like the Mets were in the same year, and had some really, really good years. The Astros lost him in the expansion draft to the Expos, and they loved him in Montreal. He was like Grand Orange, because he had red hair and the whole bit. His red hair was kind of orangey, but he could hit. He was just this really good player. So the Mets make a big trade. In 1971, he has his best year. He hits 19 homers, 97 RBIs. He batted .311 for the Expos. The Mets traded one name you're going to know. The Mets traded Mike Jorgensen, Tim Foley, and one Ken Singleton, who was a Met prospect who hadn't really worked out as a prospect. He got thrown into that trade for Rusty Staub. But the Met fans, as we said earlier, could be fickle. When he got off to a really bad start in 1972, as a lot of players do, he got booed a lot and he got hurt. And he typically wasn't hurt most of his career. But in the 1972 season, I'll never forget, my dad takes me to a game. I'm 12 years old. He comes up to bat and he's getting booed mercilessly. And there's one guy that's sitting near us that starts this chant, and then the whole stadium picks up on it. He says this: Rusty Staub, hit that ball, then go back to Montreal. And my dad turns around and my dad starts, yeah, go back to Montreal, and the whole stadium starts that chant. I felt so, even at 12 years old, I didn't join in the chant, but I felt so bad for him. And that year, he still batted .293 that year. He played in only 66 games, 9 homers, 38 RBIs. 1973, he leads the Mets to the pennant. He has an excellent year. And in 1975, there's talk that the Mets will trade him. And this is where the Mets started to go a little bit downhill. But he has his best year. He has 19 homers. He becomes the first Met to have over 100 RBIs. He has 105 RBIs. He bats .282. But then he's traded to the Detroit Tigers in the offseason for one very over-the-hill Mickey Lolich. Mickey Lolich was a great pitcher for a long time, but he was well past his prime. He was terrible with the Mets. And so coming back to, here's a little bit of a tie-in, and I'll get to why he's inspiring in a second. But the little bit of a tie-in is that at this point, I'm 15 years old. We go to a game. Mickey Lolich we're out there trying to see the players come out. We're standing around the players' parking lot at Shea Stadium, and some players come out and they wave and everything like that. Mickey Lolich comes out and he gets on a motorcycle, and fans are booing him. He got booed that whole year because he pitched terribly. And so fans are booing him as he comes, Mickey Lolich. They recognize him because he was way overweight. He was bigger than David Wells, or CC Sabathia. I think that. And when they used to, come with the big belly and everything like that. And he gets on a motorcycle, and as he peels out of the parking lot real fast on the motorcycle, he gives not only the obscene gesture, I'll say the double obscene gesture. He stops 1 second, takes his hands off of the handlebars, and gives the fans the double. And then never made it to the news because, he didn't do it he just did it in front of fans, and the media was different. But if that was now, they would have caught that on video, right? But anyway, Rusty Staub in 1985 started the Police and Fire Widows Foundation. And he was the first one to start it. That was his last year playing, 1985. Rusty Staub goes on to have some all-star years for the Tigers, bounces around a little bit after that, eventually comes back to the Mets. And for the last 3 years of his career, there was no DH in the National League, as you know. He was their primary pinch hitter. He was great, and he was crazy popular. As soon as he retires, he becomes an announcer, and he stayed an announcer with the Mets for quite some time. But he was always very charitable, and he started the Police and Fire Widows Foundation. And in the first 15 years, it raised $11 million. So that was for police officers in New York, or firemen or women in New York that were killed in the line of duty. The kids got scholarships and stuff like that. So $11 million through those 15 years was really good. After 9/11, that foundation has up until this point raised over $112 million. And he passed away in 2018. The foundation is still in effect. But Rusty Staub just had this heart for philanthropy. He wasn't a player that made a ton of money. He had a couple of restaurants, Rusty Staub's Rib Place, I think it was called. Maybe it's just called Rusty's. They've since closed here in New York. But he was just a guy that took every opportunity when he was announcer to talk about this stuff. Whether it was, at the beginning of an inning and stuff like that, please give to my foundation. He was just this guy who became very, picked a cause like we could do biblically sometimes, and he stuck with it, and he raised so much money, for so many families that have lost their loved ones, but especially like after 9/11. So Rusty Staub, I don't know what made me think of him this week. Rusty Staub's my inspiration.
That's a good one. And also, like, it's a good example of how sometimes, like, having a cause there, and then whether it's a tragedy or something, kind of can accelerate that cause. Like,
Really can.
you saw a lot with, like, after George Floyd, a lot with racial reconciliation, things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, goes on and on.
Yeah.
I want to talk very quickly about Dion Waiters,
Yes.
who has not played in the NBA in now 3 years. His last appearance was winning a championship with the Lakers in 2020, which seems like generations ago now. But the last few years, he's been struggling a lot with depression and anxiety. And his 10-year-old son asked him, "Daddy, why aren't you playing basketball anymore?" And for him, that was a wake-up call to kind of get some help and to kind of fix what was going wrong with him. So he's gotten to the point where he's gotten some help, and he did a private workout for 12 NBA teams and is looking to try to make a roster here in the 23-24 season. So it's something that'll be very interesting to watch. He hasn't signed yet, but also, like, this is kind of the time where you kind of get those guys, like the last couple guys on your roster, kind of trying to finalize it. Basketball training camp is coming up in about like a month and a half. So we'll kind of see what happens. It'll be very interesting to see if he hops on a team.
It will be. And, hopefully he makes calls to people like Kevin Love, and there's been other athletes that have come out and talked about anxiety and depression. And Love is one of the great examples of overcoming that and winning championships and stuff like that. So, we hope and pray that Dion Waiters comes back and just has a phenomenal rest of his career. He's still a very young man. That's awesome. Awesome. All right, man. You ready to take us home, or you have anything else?
No, that's it. I did find out Le'Veon Bell was exactly the same age as Saquon Barkley is now. So nailed it.
Saquon, man, take that lesson. I know you're angry. Play this season, man, and then go and do whatever you got to do. Play the season, play hard. Don't sit out a season. That never works out. I don't remember that ever working out. Not for any players in any sport, but particularly NFL, where you really need that rhythm. So let's see what kind of year your quarterback has there in Cleveland. I know it's not your quarterback, but let's see what kind of year he has, because he definitely looked rusty last year, right? after, and it was totally his fault that he sat out for the season. All right, lots to talk about next week, right? Shohei, Saquon, we'll get into all that again next week. So take us home, man.
Yep. All right, this is Kenny Squared End
Kenny.
with Sports on the Positive Tip. We'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely.